there ain't no stopping us. Fly without boarding pass. Couldn't catch me, I be moving fast. Call me a shooting star. Let 'em know who you are. Flying up in a bar. Wish on a star. Time to show 'em who's in charge. Call me a shooting star. Didn't even get to cross. I said I'm moving too far. Get to glass. Looking at a shooting star. Got more than a couple of people going mad. I swear they're rooting hard. Tell them I be big in the game like she went and got them breast implants. I said I'm moving too fast, didn't even get a glance. I'm ready to eat up track like I'm seated in a restaurant. If you had swag like mine, you know it's best to flaunt. We aren't hating because you aren't shining like it's neon, not like kings of Leon. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When that's enough, then I just have to leave. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When that's enough, then I just have to leave. Yeah, shoot, shoot. Yeah, shoot, shoot. Yeah, shooting, shooting. Yeah, shooting shots. Shooting stars. Shooting stars.
So let's see if I got everything set up correctly. And it looks like I do. The mic's working. Today, everything has gone wrong, so it can't possibly be all set up correct. You all will need to let me know in chat. As you know, I think this needs to be down a little bit. These Get Ready With Me's are participatory. It's no fun going through clips if we can't vibe back and forth. So I give a few time for people to get warmed up. And today we're not doing, in the Get Ready With Me portion, a normal, if that's a thing, a normal makeup look. I'm doing, I'm bored and just, I don't know, I'm a lot of things today. But I'm going to try like this weird Halloween-like skeleton look, kind of. I don't know. This could be a complete disaster like the rest of the day. But why the hell not, right? So I've got me some face paint and shit, like some black, some white. I watched a video, so I'm a pro now. I watched a video. But before we get started with clips, let's just do the little personal update like I like to do until some people stop being shy and start commenting. It's been a hell of a day. It's been a hell of a couple months, but it's been a hell of a day. I should have known something was coming. You know, whenever things are quiet on the LNC front, that usually means all hell is about to break loose. And yeah, it's rough in there. It's rough in there, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not getting to me, because it really seriously is getting to me. People can only take so much, and wow, boy, is that just, if they were an employer, like, they are an employer of staff, but they're not this way to staff. I believe they're good to staff, but let's pretend like the LNC was a workplace with actual like paid people. They'd be in such legal trouble for the high school bullying and shit that goes on behind the scenes. It's just absolutely nuts. And today I did have to file a formal complaint. Do I think anything will come of it? No, because it's the LNC investigating the LNC, like the cops judging the cops. I can't mention any names. Well, I can, but I'd end up getting in trouble, so I'm not going to, because I'm just going to save myself some grief. All this stuff is happening behind the scenes. But I'm going to give you a brief overview of what happened so you can tell why I actually took the step of filing a formal complaint. So we have some emailers, serial emailers, who email very, very abusive emails to the LNC about everybody. And Whitney, oh my God, gets so many abusive emails directed towards her. I feel really bad. And I'll answer your question, Dave. No, you'd think they would, but I'll tell you why not. But you know, I get my share, Joshua. Everybody gets their shares. But lately, there's just been this one particular person who serial emails about me, sometimes like within minutes. Like, it's deeply disturbing. Like, there's definitely something not right there, you know? But in the private area, I happen to mention some comments about what's going on with this person outside the LNC emails. So we're having an official discussion about potentially harassing emails from members and appropriate responses. Okay, so it's an official discussion. In the middle of that official discussion, an LNC member retitles the email thread with something about me that's intensely personal, and all of a sudden makes the discussion about me personally, particularly focusing on mental health issues and things like that. Very, very private, intimate details for a person that's not a friend of mine, that has tried to get intimately involved in my life before. And I have had to tell this person on the LNC to back off, that they were crossing personal boundaries, that I don't want them in my personal life. About 5 times before, I've had to tell this person, you're crossing a personal line, back off. Stop being overly familiar. We don't have that kind of relationship. So then, to the entire LNC, after retitling it a very intimate title, goes into depth. Oh, sorry. Goes in very in depth, like questioning my mental health and my fitness and things like that, like in front of everybody. Now listen, there comes times in life where you might have somebody that you know that you're concerned about. And it is a good thing to be concerned about somebody, but there's a proper way to go about that. Particularly, first of all, you don't be the source of that person's distress. Okay? But second, you don't do that in front of a whole group of people who are their peers. You do that in private. And particularly when that person has told you you have already invaded their personal boundaries and it's not a friend. It was way over the line. And in the middle of a debate, to take a professional colleague and then delve into intimate details of their mental state in front of everybody was just really, really intrusive and completely inappropriate and harassing. It broke our policy manual on so many levels. And I actually think, though I would never invoke this, libertarian, I actually think it broke multiple laws. Like, if that person got that intimate with me on sexual grounds rather than medical or mental health grounds, there definitely would have been a law broken. And I think this also qualifies. And I think the LNC could be, not from me, if this happened to somebody else who didn't quite have the party loyalty that I have, they could, I think they could be in deep trouble. Now, I want to make it clear, because the serial emailer is lying about me, I would never sue the party, ever. When I say I want an attorney for me in this situation, it's because of the personal lines that have been crossed and I need to protect my rights. It's never to sue the party. I'd never, ever, ever do that. Ever. But I do want to protect the party from this happening in the future to somebody else who doesn't have the compunction that would sue the party. But the lines that were crossed today, unreal. Absolutely unreal. And I do believe legally actionable if I chose to, which I do not. Out of line. And this person has been building up to this, and nobody would say anything. And I've been complaining about their intrusion into my life. And there's no way this could be allowed to be stand. Do I think something will be done about it? No, and that's a shame. But I had to file a complaint because this was just out of bounds. And you want to know what I'm envisioning? I'm envisioning someone in the future that legitimately needed some kind of help, that legitimately was in some kind of mental health emergency, and them getting treated this way. Oh my God, this could have drove somebody off the frickin' cliff. Fortunately, I'm in a good place now. I wasn't in a good place last month, but I had actual friends, not the backstabbers on the LNC. I had actual friends help me. So I'm in a good place. But I'm envisioning a vulnerable person getting treated like that. Oh my God. The tone deafness. And these people think they're the arbiters and do not see the plank in their own eye on how they treat people. And it's not the entire LNC, it's just a few people, really it is. The rest of them, I think, are, I don't want to say guilty, but are complicit by silence. But the aggressors really are just a couple people. And it's just unreal. All I want is for this particular person to leave me alone, and they won't. They're needling and needling and needling. And the rest of the LNC is letting them get away with it. And I'm done with it. And I felt the need to make the complaint public because I do believe I will be retaliated against. It's absolutely not right what is going on here. And I'm in a good place, like, overall. But that doesn't mean I'm not down today. I mean, it would wear you down. You can only take being dogpiled for so long. And that's what's going on with me and Joshua. We're being completely dogpiled on the LNC. You know, it ain't a fair fight. Now, not everybody is joining in on it, but when people are silent, they might as well. So it's been 15-2. It's such classic high school bullying, even just by sheer numbers. And the ones that are silent, even if they don't necessarily agree with me, they think I've been bad here or there, they have to see that what's going on now isn't right, and y'all need to speak up. There are some of you on the LNC who I've been friends with, who have significant others or friends that have struggled with depression or other issues. And I've helped you talk to them. I want you to imagine that your loved one is me and being treated this way. You would not stand for it. And if a mentally vulnerable person was in this position right now, and this person on the LNC did what they did and drove this person over the edge, can you imagine what kind of publicity there would be? What kind of lawsuits there could be? It's not right, and this should not be happening in libertarian circles. The pack viciousness. Ned asked what I thought of the suggestion for mediation. I talked to Ms. Epke about this privately. By the way, Ms. Epke is not the one who I have filed a complaint against. People have thought that because of her suggestion for mediation, and though I'm not going to say who it was, I don't want suspicion being cast on Ms. Epke unjustly. It's not her. I have my differences with Ms. Epke, but she would never do what was done today. Never. She wasn't aware of me filing the complaint at the time she asked for the mediation. I wrote her and said, now that there's a formal complaint, I don't think mediation is appropriate because I don't agree to have my complaint resolved by mediation. And mediation has to be consented to by all the parties. And I don't think everyone on the LNC will consent. I don't trust them. I'm not inclined to consent because mediation requires good faith. And I'm sorry, I don't presume good faith on the part of certain LNC members. They've lost that trust. I'm just being brutally honest with you. And I think it's highly... Now, I don't want to simp for Joshua. I don't want to be his white knight. He can speak for himself. But I want to tell you just my gut reaction. I think it's highly inappropriate to ask somebody to sit across from somebody else in mediation who just called you, when you're half Jewish, a Nazi collaborator or Nazi promoter. I think it is abusive to ask somebody to sit across from somebody and mediate when they slandered you like that. Now, perhaps Joshua doesn't see it this way. I can't speak for him. But can you imagine if this was a neo-Nazi and a black man? Would you tell that black man they have to sit and mediate with the neo-Nazi? I'm putting out a very extreme example just so you can get the visceral reaction. Joshua is half Jewish, and he just got publicly accused of being a defender of Nazi ideology. That's unforgivable. Unforgivable is probably not the right word. If David apologized, I do think but it's unconscionable to think, what happens sometimes, and this isn't just in libertarian circles, this is in every circle. And the Bible teaches us against this. In the parable of Solomon's baby, we like to pretend like everybody is right. Like we just need to split the baby. That's where the expression comes from. And the Bible teaches that's not just, and all you end up with is a dead baby cut in two. Sometimes there is a clear right and wrong. And what David did to Joshua is wrong. Absolutely wrong. You don't do that. And if he really felt those were some accusations that needed to be investigated, he violated our policy manual by not taking it to the executive committee. Yet nobody says anything to him. They're all over me, but they say nothing to him. Unequal weights and measures. If y'all can't see the double standards, even if you think I'm wrong on everything I've been accused of, you got to see that other people are just as wrong, and they're allowed to get away with it. Thoroughly incestuous bureaucrats right now. And if the LP as an enterprise next term is to have any hope, that stuff's got to be cleared out. And I'm not saying everybody, I'm telling you to judge. You might think I'm the one who needs to go, and that's fine. But there definitely is some serious, serious introspection. We've let the LNC operate far too independently and without accountability to the general membership. And that needs to end. I actually think we need a serious restructuring of the party. I think we need to rethink the whole LNC structure, to be honest with you. And then, if you all were in my video last night, you'll see between that and a text it sent me, a former LNC member pretty much admitted that at least their support of the suspension motion against me was retaliation for the resignation of JBH and Coburn. Of course, we all know that, but now we have one basically saying it. Saying JBH resigned because of me. No, JBH resigned because of his own bad actions. You're blaming me for pointing it out. Coburn resigned because he went against his region, and his region was about to remove him. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. But this is all coming out, and nobody is saying a thing. Nobody on the LNC is saying a thing. The libertarian swamp is real, folks. And the abuse that's gone on. And, but don't take this as a negative. Take it as a positive that it's all coming out. Because if this stuff's allowed to fester in private, gross. Now, to back about the mediation suggestion, but for this formal complaint and that issue of between David and Joshua, Ned, I would be open, I think, to a mediation. On one hand, but in the back of my head, my little warning bell is telling me, you sucker. Really. Like, part of me, I'm always like, oh, let's just make up. Those of you who don't know me well might not know. Like, I used to moderate a theology forum, and there was this guy, his screen name was Lake George Man. Anybody from T-Web here is going to start laughing. And he was such a bad behaved member. And each time he got banned, I kept letting him back in. And all my fellow moderators would say to me, all he's got to do is wink his eye and smile at you with that, you know, impish grin. And your heart melts and you let him back in. You'll forgive a million times. When you need to not be such a sucker. And every single time I regretted letting him back in. And that's the same way that comes what's going on here. So I saw her suggestion and one part of me jumped at it. And the other part of me says, Karen Ann, how many times do you need to be stabbed in the back before you stop trusting? Now, there was another question. Doesn't the Judicial Committee investigate the LNC? No. The Judicial Committee has very limited functions. If the LNC makes a decision, like to suspend somebody, or even any decision the LNC makes, let's just say they make a decision to hire a certain audiovisual vendor. I'm just pulling this out of my butt. Members can appeal that decision. But absent an appealable decision from the LNC, the Judicial Committee has no oversight. And they have no oversight over claims of misbehavior until there's an actual suspension action. And I think that's a problem. To have the LNC judge the LNC when it comes to internal misbehavior. And I think we are opening ourselves up for something really bad in the future. But I want to make this a million times clear so that no one can lie about me. I would never sue the party. I fight for this party. I love it as much as you do. We might not agree on everything, but I would never do that because it would be taking activists' money. Like, what were you asking for? A monetary judgment? Stealing from activists? For what? I could just walk away. Why would I sue? That's just ridiculous. This is a voluntary organization. I can fight, and if I think it's gone too far to be saved, I walk away. You don't sue. That's just ridiculous. And I'd never do that. But of course, people will still lie because apparently, I'm so surprised at libertarians. Just like making money is bad now, apparently asking for legal representation to protect your rights is bad now too. You're guilty if you ask for an attorney. I wonder if we think that of criminal suspects or people that say they won't talk to the cops. It's just so ridiculous. So, that's the update. And let's get to the clips. Before we start, let me do, one last thing. It looks like my job might have fell through. I think I got that phone call about it. I don't know what they were calling to tell me, but I didn't fill out the paperwork on time. They said when I interviewed for the job, they said, you're starting on Monday. You're going to have to send us certain paperwork by Friday. I said, fine. So I planned to take vacation this week while I was still unemployed. And I was gone for a few days. And while I was gone, they sent an email saying, no, we need the paperwork now. And because they didn't get it while I was out of town, now they're going, oh, well, you can't start on Monday. And then when I talked to the lady today, I'm like, well, I just sent it in. It's my first opportunity. They're like, oh, we'll see what we can do. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know what that phone call was. But she was like, well, we have another start date at the end of the month. And I'm like, I already told you that wouldn't work because the first week of September, I need some days off. And you already told me that days off won't work in the middle of training. And then they're like, well, we have another start date the middle of September. And now I'm starting to think to myself, what kind of place is this? Is this a mill that they have to start people every 2 weeks? I don't know. There's lots of red flags now. But if the phone call was there that says start Monday, my ass is starting Monday because I need the money. But otherwise, maybe it's all for the best. So, speaking of all of that, if you can, that was a great segue, huh? If you can, please become a patron. I have a goal this month of meeting my next milestone. I finally did catch up to the natural attrition. Every month, any creator will tell you they lose a few each month because people's financial situations change. But I'm trying to make it to my next big milestone. And I have $75 a month to get there. It's a stretch goal. I may or may not make it. If you can assist, I would super appreciate it. We are moving on in the patron-only content to discuss radicals for capitalism. I'm finishing up the recordings today on my summaries of the book January 1973, which was fantastic. So if you can help me, I would super, super appreciate it. In the low bar, there are other ways you can help. And of course, super chats are always welcome. Anyone who was in my stream last night saw how upset that made certain people. I just don't get libertarians that come into chat and abuse people and call you a grifter for saying you'll take tips. Oh, Shannon, I'm so glad you liked the postcard. I want to tell you a funny story. People ask why I'm so loyal to Amazon. Besides the fact that they give me good service. Back when Amazon was about to go under, I don't know if you guys remember this. It was a long time ago. But things looked really bad. And I was a very good Amazon customer. I got a handwritten postcard from Jeff Bezos, or however you pronounce it. And I never forgot it. Handwritten notes to people means something. It means you took your time and your labor and you were actually thinking of them and you wrote something to them. That's something that's missing from today's world. People may note when I send out my postcards asking people to vote for me for convention, I handwrite every single one I send out, and it's 1,500 of them. It means something when you do that, so I'm glad you appreciated it. Also, my sponsors, Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy. It is a YouTube channel, a smaller YouTube channel that they're one of my $25 a month sponsors. It's a benefit they get. I love promoting other creators. He has, I think, still under 200 subscribers. When I had under 200 subscribers, and not that I have a great deal of more, but people helped me, like Adam Kokesh. A bunch of people shouted out my YouTube channel, and I love to do that for Liberty channels. And I will do it regularly for my top tier patrons. But even if someone's not a patron, if you got a Liberty channel, email me. I'll shout you out. We need to help each other. Okay. You know, I might not do it every show, but I'd be more than happy to do you a solid. Plenty of people helped me, and I want to pay it forward and help people that I can. All right. So let's go on to the clips. Hopefully I didn't screw these up like last time. There's some good ones here, I think. And I got to try to do the skeleton makeup. I forgot I was going to do this. Now I'm nervous. Because it's been a while since I did cosplay. I got to get my little iPad here and like look at the instructions while I'm playing clips, but we'll see. And oh my God, thank you, Stephen and Michael. You guys, I'm gonna get I've been trying to hold it together today. But thank you. I super, super, super appreciate it. I am getting a little teary-eyed. Let's get to the clips.
So for more than 100 years, the ACLU, which was not always popular, by the way, among conservatives, defended civil rights. Civil liberties was the American Civil Liberties Union. That's what they did. Now they've decided that the Second Amendment is racist and therefore must be eliminated. So he's seeking to strip you of your details ahead on this Inside the Issue special. One of the most bewildering things that's happened in the past few years is watching nonprofit organizations completely betray their core mission. Education organizations setting out to hurt children. Environmental organizations promoting crowding and illegal immigration, which hurts the environment. And of course, the watchdog fact checkers online who abet lying. But maybe no turnaround has been more bewildering than what's happened to the American Civil Liberties Union. An organization founded to defend civil liberties has now decided to attack civil liberties and strip you of your rights. The ACLU, in its most latest announcement, tells us the Second Amendment, one of your civil liberties, is racist. Quote, racism is foundational to the Second Amendment and its inclusion in the Bill of Rights. Is that true? We're going to be literal for a second and ask Colion Noir.
Okay, this is a somewhat long clip, and I need to stick like a little bib in here so I don't get this all over my sweater. What's happened to the Civil Liberties Union is so sad. Now, they've never been great on gun rights, which is one of the foundational civil liberties. But they've even turned into the wokesters, you know? Even back in my somewhat neocon days, which really wasn't like, I don't even know how to describe my prior political views. It was more informed by the church I was going to, who were very Republican. And you accepted the Republican Party when you accepted Jesus. That was the type of church it was. But even back then, even though they hated the ACLU, I always admired them for sticking up for the underdogs and defending the undefendable, so that those of us who were decent people would have rights. Like, someone has to defend the right of Westboro Baptist, the scumbags of the earth. Someone has to do that. And I admired them. But they're not the same organization. And I'm saying that with a lot of sadness, because the ACLU helped me in my ballot selfie suit against Colorado. But, you know, they used to just be bad on gun rights, but now they're getting bad on free speech. And to say the Second Amendment is racist, that is just crazy. I really wish they would change their name and their logo, because each time I see their name with the Statue of Liberty, I like puke in my mouth a little bit. It's like, oh, how the mighty have fallen. We need an actual civil liberties litigation group again. And I'm not so sure that can happen anymore, because too many people will see it, well, they're too right or they're too left. The ACLU, to me, was in its heyday in a day when people still could have political conversations. And those days seem to be over. But I'm mourning what this ACLU used to be.
For the Second Amendment for a living. He's a friend of ours, and we're happy to have him on tonight. Colion Noir, thank you so much for coming on. So the Second Amendment, look, both of us know exactly what's going on here. This is a power grab by the people in charge, and they want to keep you from defending yourself. But let's just take this literally for a minute, just for fun, because we're literal people. Is the Second Amendment racist?
No, the Second Amendment is not racist. Now, if you want to make the argument, you can make the argument that gun control is racist, and there are concrete facts to demonstrate that gun control has a history rooted in racism. But the Second Amendment in and of itself isn't racist. For Christ's sakes, we're talking about a country that got its independence by a group of people coming together with their own arms to fight off a tyrannical government. And then as a result of that, writing the Second Amendment so that we can continue to protect that country. So the notion that the Second Amendment is racist is honestly nothing but a red herring. Because if you can color the Second Amendment and make it seem like it's racist, then anybody defending the Second Amendment is inherently defending racism.
Well, that's exactly right. And I remember, I'm not an American history expert or anything, but I thought that men from a bunch of northern states took their own guns south to end slavery by force. They used the Second Amendment to liberate enslaved Africans. I mean, it's completely insane, as you pointed out.
Honestly, the book that the ACO is basing this off of is written by an author who is legitimately anti-gun. She literally said it in a conversation with the ACLU where she said she doesn't believe that the citizens should have semi-automatic guns, which, as you and I both know, that's nearly every gun in the country. Right. So that should tell you everything about what this is designed to do. All it is masking a anti-gun agenda under the cloak of racism. And they know exactly what they're doing, and I just hope that people aren't continuing to fall for this because they've been doing it for a long time now. And personally, I think it's kind of disgusting trying to utilize the racial past in this country to get the very people who probably need the gun the most away from the Second Amendment. I just don't understand it, and I don't get it. And then the fact that I'm merely on here talking to you as one of the most prominent two-way defenders in the country, as a young black man, is also kind of bewildering to me, considering.
I think you're absolutely right. And of course, we both know they do it because it works, and it's kryptonite for a lot of weak people, unfortunately. I appreciate your standing up for a foundational right that all of us were born with, Second Amendment. Colleen Noor, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I really liked the interview with that gentleman, which is why I played that clip. And I think he's absolutely right. What I am really tired of is a bunch of white people who have an agenda that are whoring the real pain of a past history of racism and the fact that racism will always exist, and whoring that for their anti-gun or anti-whatever agenda. That is just so disrespectful to black people or whatever minority. You know, in this sense, we were dealing with a black gentleman. And how to make people, you know, absolutely defenseless. It is just absolutely crazy. But I am sick and tired of these smug white saviors pimping out people's pain for their agendas. How dare they? And of course, they'll discount that gentleman. Just like I get discounted when I'm dealing with certain, you know, women's groups, because I don't have the approved female opinion. He doesn't have the approved black opinion. The paternalism is sick. The paternalism is absolutely sick. And the fact that we let people get away with this, of just whoring out the racism issue for everything, and lose our rights in the process. It just astounds me. And I don't get speechless over very many things. But every little thing you hear now that is racist, it's like, is nothing not racist? It makes racist not like an actual thing anymore. And it seems like the ultimate goal of these sorts of things is an insidious actually is the correct pronunciation, creeping paternalism that's racist in itself to make minority communities absolutely dependent upon the state. And sometimes I think some of these people think it has to be that way because these people can't take care of themselves. That is racist. And if you're wondering why I'm looking very ghostly, those of you who hadn't seen, I'm trying to do like this kind of Halloween look. It's not coming out right so far. I didn't know Tucker referred to AOC as Sandy. I don't watch Tucker that much. I used to watch Fox all the time and yell at the screen because I just like getting animated watching the news. So I pick one and kind of just like get used to everybody. And Fox just used to irritate me. But when I was no longer employed, we really cut our expenses. So we don't have any cable in this house. So we have a subscription, I think, to the Peacock or whatever. It's like $5 a month. And all they've got is Newsmax, which is like the wish.com version of Fox. It's so horrible. And it's not even horrible in a good way. It's like horrible in a cheap, generic cereal kind of way. If you've ever watched Newsmax, oh my God, I'm like embarrassed to be watching it. It's so bad. I mean, at least Fox was well produced bad, was like high quality bad. Newsmax, it's embarrassing. If you've never watched it, maybe you should. You'll just be like, what? You know? So, in a way, I miss Tucker, because I used to watch him quite a bit on Fox. But the lady who really got me going, who I'd just scream at the whole time, I should get her clips and start playing them, is Judge Janine. Woof! That lady, she scares me. Like the eyes of a zealot. Like, I picture, like, marauding mobs of witch hunters when she starts talking and she gets that, like, glint in her eye. It's, like, demonic to me. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but that lady creeps me out. But let's go to the next clip. I need to try to find here. Next scene. Come on, now.
Margaret Atwood's poem, Siren's Song, begins, "This is the one song everyone would like to learn. The song that is irresistible. The song that forces men to leap overboard in squadrons, even though they see the beached skulls. Our rulers know how to sing that song, and they sing it day and night. The beached skulls are those of our fathers and our sons, our friends, neighbors, for whom the song proved not only irresistible."
I'm going to stop for 1 second. This is Robert Higgs. This is such a powerful talk. I only have 6 clips from this, though. And then we're getting to Deist, Jeff Deist, which I think most of you are who's here for. If not, come back for Jeff Deist. I'm going to disagree a lot with Jeff Deist. So if y'all are looking for some liberty, maybe, and I'll do it respectfully, obviously, because I do respect the man, and I love the Mises Institute. But I have a lot of differences with him, and some things no. But if I remember the clips correctly, I'm going to have some sharp disagreements with him, and I want y'all's input. But let's continue with Robert Higgs. I just love him. So just wanted to let you know what this was and what was coming up.
Fatal. The state is the most destructive institution human beings have ever devised. A fire that at best can be controlled for only a short time before it o'erleaps its improvised containments and spreads its flames far and wide.
Okay, sorry. If you notice the Filmora things there that I forgot to clip off, this is for when I was up in the mountains. I couldn't get an internet connection. I was extracting out these clips. And Filmora is the editing program I use. But if it can't verify your license, it puts you on the trial version. So I'm sorry. All of the Robert Higgs thing will end with that Filmora watermark. Deal with it. What can I say? But Robert Higgs, if you don't know, he's the guy who has the quote that goes around YouTube in a meme form that says, he's an anarchist who says, "Anarchy is no guarantee that systemized violence will not happen, but the state is a guarantee that it will." And I just love that quote. And once you take that on board, you're like, whoa, that's powerful.
States, by their very nature, are perpetually at war. Not always against foreign foes, of course, but always against their own subjects. The state's most fundamental purpose, the activity without which it cannot even exist, is robbery. The state gains its very sustenance from robbery, which it pretties up ideologically by giving it a different name, taxation, and by striving to sanctify its intrinsic crime as permissible and socially necessary. State propaganda, statist ideologies, and long-established routine combine to convince many people that they have a legitimate obligation, even a moral duty, to pay taxes to the state that rules their society.
Okay, it's going to go to the femora thing. And I'm creating the sunken eyes here for my skeleton. It's already looking a little scary, isn't it? Holy shit. So, isn't it amazing, though? Before you really became entrenched, and maybe you did, I didn't. Did you ever question the legitimacy of taxation? You know how many people don't? I didn't for most of my life. But when you hear him explain it, it's just like, wow, that is a brainwashing job, isn't it? That we just accept the legitimacy of this organization and actually believe we consent. And some people do. I don't.
They fall into such erroneous moral reasoning because they are told incessantly that the tribute they fork over is actually a kind of price paid for essential services received, and that in the case of certain services, such as protection from foreign and domestic aggressors against their rights to life, liberty, and property, only the government can provide the service effectively. They are not permitted to test this claim by resorting to competing suppliers of law, order, and security, however, because the government enforces a monopoly over the production and distribution of its alleged services and brings violence to bear against would-be competitors. In so doing, it reveals the fraud at the heart of its impudent claims and gives sufficient proof that it is not a genuine protector, but a mere protection racket.
Okay, it's going to pull up that little femora thing. Now, here's really, I'm going to say this with all due respect to my minarchist friends, because you know I don't divide on that shit. That point he made, man, my face is scaring me. That point he made right there, that's the crux of the reason why I became an anarchist. And I think the dilemma that all minarchists need to struggle with. And that is, most minarchists will say, yeah, I believe in the non-aggression principle. That you can't commit aggression against peaceful people who aren't violating your rights. Okay? The state, by its very existence, has to threaten aggression on peaceful people who do not wish to use the state's protection racket. What would happen if I started a competing protection agency in competition to the state? I would be violently shut down. Whose rights am I violating? But as a minarchist, you're supporting that. That's what you need to deal with, in my opinion, with all due respect. I'm going to do a show. Roy Childs did a great essay on this. It's called An Open Letter to Ayn Rand, that I would love to have a conversation with you guys on that. If you want to examine that presupposition. If you don't, listen, I understand it's scary to consider anarchy. I kind of wish I never did. But the mind, I don't want to say once opened, because that makes it seem like you guys are closed-minded and you're not. Let's put it this way. Something once seen cannot be unseen, unfortunately. There's some things I would love to unsee. But if any of y'all are minarchists here in chat, I would love, love, love to hear from you. I'm really getting that hollowed out eyeball look, aren't I? Holy shit. Now we need to start putting some black in there. But okay, let's go to the next clip.
Democratic political forms and rituals, such as elections and formal administrative proceedings, disguise this class exploitation and trick the masses into the false belief that the government's operation yields them net benefits. In the most extreme form of misapprehension, the people at large become convinced that owing to democracy, they themselves are the government. Individual passages back and forth across the boundary between the political class and the exploited class testify, however, to nothing more than the system's cunningly contrived flexibility and openness.
Okay, and that is the perniciousness of democracy, where it convinces you that you've consented and voted for your own enslavement and their own robbing and pillaging. I wish I could find the clip of the show. Oh shit, that's a little too watery. It's getting in my eyes. That's not working. Oh man, that got in my eyes. Let me try that again. I think I just had a little bit too much water on it. From Dave Smith, in which he called Democracy and Voting a Get Out of Anarchy free card. You know, it's an illusion. Oh, that is stinging my eyeballs. I think I'm going to need to not use liquid. I'm going to need to use black powder, even though that's not as effective. So, yeah, love to know your thoughts on that. You guys are being awful silent.
Neither a man, nor a crowd, nor a nation can be trusted to act humanely or to think sanely under the influence of a great fear. Indeed, the fundamental condition of the entire process by which the government leads people to their own destruction is widespread public fear, which causes people to put aside their normal distrust of the state and to turn to it, especially to its chief, as a child turns to a parent.
Now, this clip was taken referring to, whatchamacallit, 9/11 and the war on terror. Not about the COVID regime, but oh my God, is that coming true now? The state expands its power, and people tolerate it and clamor for it. I'm sorry, with the scary look I'm giving you guys, oh my God. This makeup is pretty hideous. It's exactly what I'm going for. I'm going for a Halloween look, you guys. I don't think this is attractive. I think it's scary. And Ned Kelly says, maybe it's only us anarchists here. Yay, anarchist slumber party. Okay, but yeah, wow. That sure described COVID, didn't it?
It is a sound interpretive rule, however, that anything that cannot be accomplished except with the aid of threats or the actual exercise of violence against unoffending persons cannot be beneficial to one and all.
And that is the nature of the state. And to me, the challenge to menarchy. If rights protection has to be accomplished, if you believe rights protection has to be accomplished through a course of menarchy, I would, even though Ayn Rand would have a fit because she was a menarchist, not like me using her words here, but I would say this to her, check your premises. Okay, I think I got the sunken eyes pretty good. What do you think? Whoa. My green eyes are popping too, aren't they? Okay, now we're going to move on to some of the skull contouring. Alrighty. Let me take a look at the screen here. No, Wayne doesn't know what my look is like. When I go outside, he's gonna freak out. And Michael Stengel, that's a good place to be. Again, y'all know I don't make a big issue out of these things. It's a fun thing to talk to libertarians about, but we are so far from that being anything to get really incensed about. So now I'm just trying to put some weird contouring in here. Again, I'm following a tutorial on YouTube. It was a short one. That's why I'm following that one. Let me just do this before I start the next clip. Just want to at least get those. I think I need a sharper brush for this. But this will do. Because I have to blend it out. Okay. Let's go to the next clip. It might be diced now. Was that 6? I only have 6 Higgs clips. So it might go to diced now.
Well,
yes.
I would say I follow you. I keep track of your stuff, I guess, from a distance, not super close. But I have been known to both you and Michael Heiss and to Tom Woods, for that matter, to be, a little bit on the outside, throwing rocks in from time to time, I guess. I understand the impulse. I mean, you've got this party. It has the name Libertarian in it. It has ballot access, or presumably has ballot access. And it's got an immediacy to it that longer-term projects don't have, because you have a campaign, or you have fundraising, or you have something right in front of you every 2 years or 4 years, or maybe even more frequently locally. And I am very much aware of and respectful of the criticism of places like the Mises Institute that, hey, guys, come on. Education's great, 900-page books are great, but it's a little late. It's the 8th inning. It's the bottom of the 8th, and we got to be in there, because things are getting weird and wild and reckless in this country, and all that academic stuff and all that theoretical stuff is all well and good, but it's not what's required today. And I understand that criticism. I think you need both, I suppose.
Okay, sorry, those Fillmore clip things are still in there. I didn't realize that even is through the diced thing. It's because I clipped these out when I was up in the mountains, still working for you guys. Up in the mountains, working on my show. And I'm just contouring my face here. So what was interesting about that diced clip is he heard the exact opposite criticism than we normally hear. Like, he heard that the Mises Institute shouldn't be, like education is useless, that we're in the, we're at the end of the game, end of the ball game. But what I'm used to hearing is those groups such as Cato, Mises, I know they're not the same thing. I'm just doing types. We should encourage them to do the education thing, and we should completely stay out of it. So I find it interesting that him, from that sort of background, says that he hears criticism that education is useless. The criticism I'm used to hearing is that you shouldn't mix politics with education, which I think is very wrong-headed. But I just thought it was really interesting on how he has to defend that he has an educational think tank. I just can't even imagine libertarians having a problem with that. But maybe I shouldn't say that. There was a lot of things that I wouldn't imagine libertarians doing until this year. And I've seen the butt-ugly side of libertarians this year. Starting to come together, isn't it? Okay. Let's go to the next clip. Well, I'm going to look at my little video here to see where I do the teeth and all that. I think I need, though, a marker for the teeth. Okay, next clip.
Very much over the idea that Americans are natural libertarians. They aren't. And that's okay. Look, for example, what the LGBT people did with 1%, 2%, 3% of the population in just a span of 20-odd years. They basically got everything they wanted, and they did so because they were very savvy politically. They used the legislatures when they had to. They used the courts when they had to. They used executive orders when they had to. They used corporate pressure, social opprobrium, the media. They had a lot of people who were not necessarily LGBT themselves or even in LGBT movements who were nonetheless sympathetic to their cause. You know, people in media and art, performing arts and, you know, corporate honchos and that sort of thing. So that's a tremendous success story for a tiny, relatively tiny minority of the population. So, you know, I don't believe this idea that you got to have 51% of the population with you. Let's say, Dave, that 10% of America is reasonably coherent in their views on politics and economics.
Okay. Again, sorry for the watermarks. I'm going to keep saying that. That I really agree with him. One thing I hear libertarians say all the time, and I just don't believe it, is that Americans are naturally libertarian. No, they're not. Natural libertarians do not vote for the state that we have today. They rebel against it. I do not know where people justify that most people are libertarians and just don't know it. To me, that is so patronizing. Like, we know you better than you know you. So we're going to tell you that you're libertarians and you just don't know it. To me, it's much more respectful to accept people for what they are and try to work with them there than pretend like there's something that they're not. Does that seem arrogant to anyone else? I don't know. It just always rubs me the wrong way when I hear libertarians telling other people what they are. Most people are libertarians, just don't know it. What? That's... I don't know. That just really, I think, is very, very tone deaf.
I'm more interested in separation than persuasion. If there's anything the last 4 or 5 years have taught us, it's that you only have so much time and energy. You have to have guerrilla tactics. In other words, you have to try to get the most bang for your buck in whatever you do. And I think this idea that you are going to win over 80 million people, let's say, to vote for even a Rand Paul or something, I think is increasingly dubious.
Okay, and I was looking at my tutorial there. And I agree with him there. You can accomplish an awful lot with a small percentage of people. And I think as libertarians, my dog is freaking out, we need to come to grips with that. And we need to leverage it's something like, there was another show I did where Michael Malice had said, a small group, I'm just working on some of the other makeup here. Look, I really fucked that up, huh? I don't got a steady hand. A small group of motivated people can accomplish a lot because most people are apathetic. Most people don't even care enough to be opponents. This is getting all messy. I'm going to need to do this with shadow. It's getting there, but I'm going to need to do it with shadow. I'm going to wet some shadow. So, I do think as libertarians, whoa, I'm really messing it up. You know what? Skeletons don't have to have pretty makeup. So it can be a little sloppy. We're just going to blend that out. We're just going to blend that mistake out. And stop focusing on, oh, we're going to win the presidency. That ain't going to happen for a long time, people. And we need to define what winning is. That's not a Sharpie. It's an eyeliner. But I really should be using a gel eyeliner, but I can't find my gel eyeliner, so I was making do. So this isn't exactly right, but we're gonna work with it. It's supposed to just look scary. It looks like a cat nose though, don't it? Let me just blend this out. I think it's coming together now. And if we motivate our activist base, our group of highly motivated people, we can change the world. And let me, where'd I put my glasses? Oh, they're right here. I see, the Demonaut said, I don't know what's going on. I'm doing a, like, skeleton look while I'm discussing politics. Why not, right? Okay, so let's continue.
You know, when you talk about the LGBT community, which is a really good example of a very small group of people who had a radical influence on government policies and society and culture in general, do you think we're up against something there where it's like, I remember reading Rothbard talk about how the kind of a Fabian incrementalist approach works well for what got you already?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Well, right, because he was saying this works well for the people who are advocating more centralized power because you're going with the wind. But people who are advocating decentralized power or limiting of power, this goes against all of the incentives. So it's much less likely to be successful. It's much easier for an AOC to say, hey, big, huge, powerful government, let's take a little bit more power. You know, whereas if someone, even like a Paul Ryan type figure, says, hey, maybe we should try to balance the budget in 75 years or something like that. You know, they're running ads where he's pushing grandma off a cliff.
That was something that really, really struck home with me. And I don't think I realized this before. I always knew there was something wrong with the moderate, let's only worry about baby steps approach. It's not going to work because we're going against the tide. Baby steps worked for the communists and the socialists because they already laid the educational groundwork in the schools, that people were ready to go in that direction. We don't have the groundwork to take baby steps to liberty. Our baby steps are, like he said, balance the budget in 75 years. The Fabian approach doesn't work in the climate we have now. We have to go for it. We've got to be bold and radical and go for it. Sorry, folks, that might not be what you want to hear, but I think that's the truth. And I think he nailed that.
The thing about revolutions is that you're not aware of them until they've happened. You know, that's what Garrett's essay, The Revolution was all about. It's happening around you, but you don't have the benefit of hindsight yet. So what happened in 2020 represents the greatest shot we've had at some degree of subsidiarity, federalism, localism, or even outright secession that we'll probably ever see in multiple lifetimes. I mean, not only were the CDC and the UN and the WHO unable to project any authority internationally, all these countries just immediately closed their borders and said, we're going to do what we're going to do. Singapore went at this thing very different than China, very different than Japan, very different than Sweden. So all of a sudden, there was no international agency with any legitimacy. But then here at home, we saw the same thing. I mean, we had a beautiful, beautiful experiment between the 50 states. And it's like nothing I've ever seen, where all of a sudden people were thinking of themselves as Californians and Floridians and New Yorkers and New Jerseyites far more than they had ever thought of themselves as that before. And we had different governors lashing out at each other. You had Gavin Newsom alluding to the Republic of California. That's what DeSantis ought to be doing now, by the way. You have this incredible United Van Lines survey of who's moving out of what state, who's moving into what state. And as you might imagine, the big losers were California and New York and New Jersey and Illinois. And the big gainers were Florida and Texas and Tennessee and, So that is before our eyes unfolding, not even that slowly, a form of soft secession. I mean, there's nothing else to call that. So this, to me, is really, really exciting, and far more exciting than, you know, Nikki Haley versus Kamala Harris 2024.
Now, something he brought up earlier that I forgot to, and it's coming together, that I forgot to highlight. And that is where he said he believes in separation more than persuasion. I'm not so sure how much I buy that, but I'm starting to buy it more and more. And at PorkFest, they were selling these t-shirts that fascinated me, that basically had like showed a separation. It had the porcupines on one side and the sheep on the other side. And it said the porcupines need to separate from the sheep. And this kind of fits in with what I had been saying, where I advocate for panarchy. Panarchy is separation. And why don't we let everybody win and have the systems that they want? You can't make people libertarian in the way that we see. We can't make people want Ancapistan. So I do think secession, which that word's been fouled by its use for an evil purpose, but the concept itself, this isn't really coming out that great, but we're going to go with it. The concept itself is a good concept. I gotta work on the mouth more. This is my first try. And we're gonna play another clip while I screw around with this some more and blend it. Okay. Kind of weird. All right, let's continue.
Yeah,
I
agree. Yeah, so I think it's such an interesting point. A lot of really interesting stuff there. I remember thinking, I was talking about this on my podcast, Part of the Problem, that it really reminded me almost of something out of the Soviet Union, like before they built the wall and people are flooding into West Germany from East Germany, and yet Pravda is telling you that this is the paradise for workers here, but then, you can see with your own eyes where people are going. So the entire corporate press is telling you that, New York and New Jersey and California handled this thing so well, and Florida and South Dakota, these places were just terrible, and Texas, this is so risky that they would open up like this, and yet you just see it. I mean, you see, like, everyone in these places knows people. Everyone who I know who lives in New York knows close friends who moved to Florida or moved to Texas. So it's such a contradiction between, it's a real, like, the emperor's new clothes type of situation where they're just telling you something that you can see with your own eyes is clearly, transparently not the reality.
My dog is whining, if you haven't seen. She keeps trying to jump up, and I'm like going, oh my God. She's so cute, though. Okay, this is coming out a little better now that I'm blending it out. And I think she wants to eat dinner, but you'll probably hear her whining. But yeah, haven't we experienced a kind of soft secession where the laboratory, as Gary Johnson used to call it, for school choice, but it's really coming up for vaccine choice, right? For totalitarian choice. But I love hearing it described as a kind of soft secession, because that is, in fact, what it is. I mean, I'm really wondering with your thoughts, you guys, with this. And when the next clip is playing, I'm going to get up and let my dog out, because she really really is having a fit. So I'm going to, I can hear it, and I'm going to go let her out because I don't like hearing her be unhappy. So let's play it and we'll continue.
The way to follow that up is to put the pedal to the metal, not to, sort of take stock of things and catch your breath and, start saying milquetoast things like we're socially liberal, fiscally conservative,
Right.
which, by the way, are totally incompatible. Anybody
Yes.
listening, it's like choose one, because socially liberal doesn't lead to fiscally conservative. It leads to a bunch of dysfunction and out of wedlock kids and, crappy society.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And also, what does socially liberal even mean anymore is like a pretty big question. And at least if you're talking about the left wing cultural stuff that's being crammed down everyone's throats from all, areas of what Curtis Yarvin would call the cathedral, the corporate press and academia and the political class and all the big corporations. People hate that stuff. Why would you even want to associate yourself with that? I mean, it's wildly unpopular.
Okay, here's where I'm going to start to disagree. And this is because, Jeff Deist is, and I think Dave Smith up to a point, is unapologetically a cultural conservative, and that's fine. I'm not a cultural conservative, and I don't think it is at all helpful or obvious to say that you have to pick one. That unless you're what they would define as a cultural conservative, that you can't be fiscally conservative. I do not believe that's true. They might be led to believe that's true because the system that we have now is incentivizing certain behavior. It most certainly is. If people don't have to take care of themselves, they can engage in much riskier types of behavior and the state will pay for it. But I think they're wrong in conflating that with being not culturally conservative. The things that we might think of as cultural conservative values, perhaps it's true that those do require a fiscal conservatism. I'll grant that for sake of argument. But absent a state, we do not yet know if things that we would define as not culturally conservative could be sustained, perhaps through different kinds of communities, perhaps through different kinds of family and mutual aid. I do not believe that the phenomena, which is fairly modern, of the mom pop 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, the typical cultural conservative view, is the only way to have a free society at all. It might be your preference, and that's fine. I'm perfectly willing for you to have that preference. But to say pick one in that kind of arrogant kind of way, I don't think is at all helpful nor proven. Perhaps it will turn out to be the case. We really haven't had a chance to try it. But the fact is, cultures throughout history have held different cultural norms and families and structures as their conservative. And if we're even going to go back on the bedrock of religion, the dirty secret that a lot of Christians don't want to discuss is, at least throughout the whole Old Testament time, they were polygamist. Notice I said gynist, not gymist. It's G-Y-N, meaning multiple wives. That was considered conservative and normal then. But we would frown upon that today. There are societies throughout the world that operate and have operated for thousands of years on a polyandrous model. I don't know, but I don't think it's correct or helpful to act like only this narrow view of cultural conservatism is the only thing that's conducive to liberty. That is driving the culture war within the party. To me, if you can accomplish it without force, without stealing from other people, you don't have a right to this culture that you think you want. If that's what ends up happening, that's fine. But it might not be what ends up happening. And I reject the presupposition that it's the only one that could work. And that's where I do part ways with a lot of Mises people. And I find it funny, though, when the critics of the Mises caucus say, oh, they only accept cultural conservatives in their ranks. Not that I'm in their ranks, I'm not a member, but they certainly have welcomed me into the family as a honored guest. Let's put it that way. And I am not a cultural conservative. In fact, I'm a very open cultural deconstructionist and somewhat of a degenerate. And they welcome me into as an honored guest. But I will always push back against this narrative put forward by Jeff Deist that you can, cultural conservatism is the only way to maintain fiscal conservatism. I don't believe that. Speaking of, there was something else there that kind of distracted me. I suppose it'll come to me. But that is, but I also agree, though, that for the party to describe itself as fiscally conservative and socially liberal is complete false advertising. Because not all libertarians are socially liberal. And really, as Dave said, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means anymore. I kind of define it as anything that's not conservative. It's more defined by what it's not than what it is. But what is it? I don't even know anymore. It's certainly not progressivism. But to define the party as socially liberal is not correct. Because there's nothing about force that requires a certain social model. Now, if they said socially, I don't even know the right word. Socially, mind your own business. Like, fiscally, I don't even like those terms at all. I think we ought to abandon them in general and just center our definitions around the use of force. Because let's say, are we really even necessarily fiscally conservative? Let me throw something out at you. This just occurred to me. So, in a truly voluntary society, and you had a voluntary governance, let's say, that everyone consented to, who's to say people won't throw a bunch of money at it for them to waste in a non-conservative way? If it's voluntary, who cares? And I'd never really considered this before. We need to focus on the force aspect and not these labels that don't serve us any longer. We're fiscally don't steal from people, and socially don't commit force against peaceful people. I mean, it's all about the non-aggression principle, isn't it? And property rights. Why are we defining ourselves in these tired terms? I'd like to check out comments here, because this is something I'd really love to discuss with you guys. JG, this is a great thought, JG. Let me see if I can put that on my screen. It's funny how they call left-wing opinions the cathedral, while they do not think anything is wrong with the actual cathedral of Christian thought, which has more support than left-wing stuff. Right-wing or Christian or religious or whatever category you want to put in, social views or social norms have been enforced by force and still are throughout a great deal of the world and in even parts of this country. So you're absolutely correct. There absolutely also is a right-wing aspect to the cathedral. It's not just left-wing things. And perhaps I'm so vocal about this because I come from a fundamentalist religious background, very right wing, and I was very damaged by that. Personally, I've seen the harm in this enforced or vaunted cultural conservatism. Just look in Christianity at the purity culture that is just what it wrecks young people's lives. You even have the author of that book, was it Joshua Harris, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, who was like the paragon of the purity movement, who's now even rejected it. Everything in cultural conservatism is not puppies and baskets. I think there's a people behind that screen. There's a dog behind the screen, but no people. JG says, that's my problem with Dave Smith. He has gone so anti-woke. He is a spokesperson for conservative lifestyle. Libertarian presidential candidate should talk about free minds and free market. I think he would as a presidential candidate. On his show, he's giving his personal opinion. So I really don't think it will be that much. He got asked that, actually, by Gillespie, and he said he wouldn't make his campaign about that. So I think we could be fine with that. I'm anti-woke, but I'm not a spokesperson for the conservative lifestyle at all. And I'm glad there's people like me, because too many people have now, who reject conservatism, are embracing woke because they think being woke is being anti-conservative and being anti-woke is being pro-conservative. So I like being a person that's anti-woke, but not at all culturally conservative. At all. Mr. Green, we're all degenerates. Well, from your lips to God's ears, right? I used to like to when I first became a libertarian, there were a lot of libertarians that bent over backwards in agony to distance themselves from the charge of being libertines. Well, you want to know what? Some libertarians are libertines, and there's not a damn thing wrong with it. I'm quite libertine. And I do think it actually is somewhat of a natural offshoot from libertarianism. That I don't think this strict repressive, I find, no insult upon anybody else, I'm telling you my personal feelings, type of conservative straitjacket is natural to the human condition. And I think human beings, far more than being naturally libertarian, are a bit more naturally libertine. We just need permission to be so sometimes. I like that better, Stephen. Though I'm not so sure if that's exactly right either, but it's closer, that's for sure. Michael Stengel says, I always took the social liberal fiscal conservative to apply to government actions, not personal actions. I think that was the intent, but that's not what it's evolved to be. But even so, with government actions, is the government socially liberal, and do we want it to be? I think it should be socially agnostic. I think the government should have its hands completely off of social issues. What's libertines? You're spelling it. I don't mean like teenagers who are libertarians. No. Libertine. I don't know what a good definition of a libertine is. I think it'd probably be like a hedonist. But let's see what Mr. Google tells us. Well, it's not a good definition. I wouldn't go with this definition. I would go, okay, it's kind of like when you look up anarchy, and I'll tell you it's chaos. So I'm going to read you the entire definition and tell you what I agree with and don't disagree with. Because this is skewed towards certain, I think, cultural norms. It says, a libertine is one devoid of most moral principles. Disagree. There's a book out there, and it's from a left-winger, don't get all upset, but called The Ethical Slut. So it's possible to be ethical and be even sexually promiscuous. So this is, I think, colored by a certain cultural context, a sense of responsibility or sexual restraints. Okay, but I would agree with this. Someone who ignores or even spurns accepted morals and forms of behavior sanctified by the larger society. I would say it's somebody who spurns respectability politics. I would say it's somebody who says if you believe in COVID passports, you can go fuck yourself with a barbed dildo. That sort of thing. And it says libertine, and this right here I think sums it up better. Libertines put value on physical pleasures, meaning those experienced through the senses. And I think that probably is it. It says an extreme form of hedonism. I think that's a decent definition. But I wouldn't, they're making it people devoid of all morals. No, devoid of certain cultural or very flip their noses at certain cultural norms. And doesn't treat them as sacred cows. I do think it's a form of protest in a way against arbitrary restrictiveness that's meant to control people. Okay, continuing.
Well, I hope if you decide to run for president, God forbid, that you will understand that populism, A, is a tactic. It's not an ideology unto itself. It's an empty vessel. You imbue it with your own views. And two, that populism is entirely justified when it's up. This idea that populism represents this dark and dangerous action. That's what it means to be a reactionary. Progressives always forget this. Like, oh, you reactionaries. Well, to what are we reacting exactly?
Right.
Guess what? Look.
That was interesting. Because populism is used as such a dirty term. And I agree with Jeff Deist here. That it is not necessarily a dirty term. That it can be a useful term in the hands, of libertarians. And that being a reactionary is not necessarily a bad thing if what you're reacting against is evil. The people who were opposed to Southern slavery were reactionaries. I'd gladly be that kind of reactionary. I'm a reactionary against the predations of the state.
Look at the 20th century. What did they screw up? Money, banking, war and peace, diplomacy, public education, medicine, media. I mean, elites screwed the pooch. Ever since Wilson, ever since World War I, they've done nothing but screw us. So, this idea, oh, you populists represent this dark and malevolent force. No, I'm sorry. When elites have failed this badly, populism is entirely justified.
Agreed. I think I might have passed it or I might have missed it where he said the term populism is an empty vessel and it can be poured, a lot of different meanings can be poured into it. And I absolutely agree. And I do think there are some good libertarian meanings that can be poured into both reactionary and populist. It's almost like anarchist. It's like when where Michael Malice opened his book and said, there's a lot of different views of anarchy. And that in some sense, that term itself is a bit of an empty vessel.
And I think you have, let's just say, you're a comedian. I think you have a reasonably blue-collar vibe to you as opposed to a wonkish vibe. And, if you're going to be involved in movement libertarianism or running as a candidate or something, I think you should go with it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I've always said that I think libertarians are in many ways the true populists and the best populists, because we actually have what most populists are missing, which is like a firm understanding of exactly how the elites are screwing over regular people.
And I want to, JG had a comment that I'd like to put up here, because I think Dave just repeated what we'd been saying. And JG says he thinks that Dave will be disappointed to discover that the media won't care about his campaign. The traditional media won't. But I think the alternative media will love him because they already love him. He already has his foot in the door there. And I would, with your second comment that I'd like to put up here, I think this ties into what we were talking about earlier. I don't think he has to reach a majority of the country. I think he just has to reach the people that are the committed activists that change the world. The majority of the country is apathetic most of the time. They're not who we need to reach. We need to reach the firebrands. We need to reach the people that will live, eat, die liberty. That's what they expend their lives doing. We don't need to reach the majority. No political movements are won by going from zero to majority. Doesn't work that way.
And I don't understand how you could be a libertarian and understand how this whole racket works, whether we're talking about cronyism, the revolving door, from politics to big business, regulatory capture, the Federal Reserve, war profiteering, and not look at that. And I'd almost say inherently what we are populists.
In that sense, I think he's correct. Though I do think we need to be very careful to distinguish that term, because the term has a tainted, like secession, has some taint to it. But I don't think that doesn't mean we shouldn't redeem it. Because our enemies will always taint the terms and things we use and are interested in. Look at how we started out with them saying that the Second Amendment was racist. We need to define our own realities and terms. But we have to be careful to do that, though. We can't use a term that's been imbued with a lot of negative meaning and then get all offended and pissed off when people don't understand we're using it in a different way when we haven't gone out of our way to explain that.
There's several points just in human action, but also definitely in liberalism, maybe in nation, state, and economy, where Mises basically blasts universalism. It says, by what authority, by what God do we make these pronouncements? So I think you have to be willing to pay the price. And the price is that other people don't see the world the way you do, and that other people aren't very libertarian, and that libertarianism is not something that can be imposed. It can't be imposed.
Okay, there I think he's way off base, and this might require an entirely different show. What does it mean to impose libertarianism? That is what needed to be defined there. If he means making everyone happy to live without a state and a bunch of regulations and things like that, no, of course, you can't impose that. But if rights are foundational, he's going to get into this a bit, which I believe they are, there's nothing else you can impose other than a respect for rights. That's it. And it does respect rights to allow people who voluntarily want these extra burdens to band together with other people who feel likewise and live in what from outward appearances would look just like the statist society we have today, except for the fact that everyone there agreed to it. And that is the difference. They are just as libertarian. The people who get together only with other people who agree with them and voluntarily assume all kinds of control on their lives are just as libertarian as the anarchists. Because it's about honoring rights and consent. And in that case, the only thing you can enforce is libertarianism. And that, to me, it's like nonsensical. It's like, well, you can't enforce other people not killing you. Of course you can. That's one of the few things you can enforce. Other people don't agree. Well, too bad, so sad. When it comes to rights, that's the only thing that's enforceable. That's the only thing that's justly enforceable. Now, what people do with those rights, as long as it's not aggressive against other people, that's going to look vastly different. That's panarchy. But you make a big mistake if you think The group of people living in voluntary communism aren't just as libertarian as the people living in voluntary Mad Max Welcome to Thunderdome. That's where the mistake, I think, is being made here.
A lot of people just have no interest in it whatsoever. They think it's absolutely crazy. So again, I'm looking for people who are talking about separation rather than persuasion.
Yeah, I think Mises agreed with you on that, and certainly Hoppe would have agreed. Do you think, did Rothbard get that wrong?
Well, look, I think you could say there are universal human rights. We don't even need Rothbard. We can just take Walter Black's interpretation of Rothbard and say all of this is, of course, universal, Jeff, because everybody owns their body. Everyone ought to have the right to not be physically infringed upon with their body, held captive, or physically aggressed against. And from that, we can spiral out in little concentric circles and say, well, you need property because you can't just be standing naked on an unowned spit of ground. You're going to need some property. You're going to need some clothes. You're going to need some calories to come into your body. You're going to need some sort of habitation, presumably. And so these things flow from ownership of your person. I mean, I would certainly grant that to any human on Earth. And if someone says, Jeff, is that universal? I would say in Jeff world, and certainly in Walter world, that's universal. But like the libertarian conception of property rights, go talk about that to a Zen Buddhist, and he'll look at you like you're 10 feet tall or something. I mean, so many things we think are universal aren't. And that's what...
Disagree. Property rights are universal, even if nobody disagrees with it. Go talk with somebody in Britain about gun rights, and they'll look at you like the Zen Buddhist just looked at you. Does that mean then your right to self-defense is not universal just because some people don't recognize it? No, it doesn't. Your rights aren't dependent upon other people recognize them. They're just dependent upon you being human. And as long as that Zen Buddhist won't try to use force against you with your property, let them be. Just let them be. But I think he really contradicted himself here. Because property rights flow from you owning your body. It is universal. Those basics are universal. The boundaries of them may not be. I did a show for a patron request. My $25 and up a month patrons get to ask me to delve more deeply into an issue of their choice, or maybe review a video. And one of my patrons, Clayton, asked me to take a look at this Larkin Rose video on homesteading. And I looked at it and went a little deeper into it and explained how those, the boundaries of homesteading, the boundaries of property rights are not set in stone, but that doesn't mean the kernel isn't.
And I just find these conversations so interesting, like just the conversation we're having right now. But I'm also in a position where I go around to other groups in the libertarian world. And, I'll do Kennedy's show regularly. And I just did an interview with Reason for the Reason interview series. I just did one that was released earlier today. Nick Gillespie interviewed me. And it's just so interesting that while they use this same term, libertarian, I think... While I have this conversation, and I think this is just such a fascinating conversation, I think they would look at us like we were 10 feet tall for even talking like this. And I don't know, I'm kind of curious, like, your thoughts of that. Like, how wide is the gap between Cato and Mises, or Reason and Mises?
Well, it's pretty wide. They have appended a set of left cultural precepts to thin libertarianism. And you could equally and validly criticize me for appending, I guess, right cultural, I don't know about precepts, but preferences.
I'm glad he acknowledged that. But I think his go beyond preferences. I think Jeff Dice does exactly what he thinks is the problem with, say, Cato. He appends right cultural precepts. It's not just preferences. I think we heard that earlier. And I disagree with the left doing it, and I disagree with the right doing it. I am a thin libertarian. Libertarianism is as thin as it gets. It's just about non-aggression. The minute you start, and I flirted with thick libertarianism, the minute you start appending things to it, you get into this woke nightmare that we have now. And it is a snake that will turn around and bite you in the ass.
But here's the thing. You know, I don't share progressive ends. If you say, well, look, we agree with you progressives, it's just we want to get there using libertarian means, no, not even close. And then also both Reason and Cato have been dreadful over the years towards Rothbard, towards Lou Rockwell, towards Ron Paul, towards the Mises Institute. So there's that. I mean, I don't,
I want to stop right there. You don't have to agree with their ends. But if they're looking to get there through libertarian means, you should support them. Because libertarian means they won't be forcing it on you. And just because it's not the culture you would prefer. If they truly are not advocating force. I don't think we need to make a big deal out of the fact that we don't agree with their lifestyle choice. Or whatever, their vision of the perfect society. As long as they're not trying to use force.
One of these people says, well, it doesn't matter, it's all just ideas. No, these are people I, except for Rothbard, know and love personally. So I don't care about your ideology or your ideas. If you attack someone I love, screw you.
Yeah, and try to ruin them, not just, not attack like their ideas. They're attacking them personally.
And that's a huge problem. The politics of personal destruction are what's going on in the party right now. And it's awful. And I absolutely agree with them. Your ideas are shit. If you're not a good human being that doesn't feel like you absolutely have to destroy people that disagree with you. And that's just become the norm. Hey, Wayne, I know I have the skeleton face on. Don't get scared. I did a makeup thing, so everyone was asking if you knew what I was doing. Now he knows.
Now I know.
Now I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, but I don't think we need to focus on these social issues. I think that's a huge, huge mistake from to make the big deal out of the fact that he doesn't agree with them socially. And, I see what I was getting with the politics of personal destruction. That's become so ingrained that even good people, or not, what we would consider to be good people, are even engaging in it. What do you think's going on with me with the LNC? It's the politics of personal destruction. It's because of the wokeism. Even if they don't identify it as that, even if the target isn't like they're coming after me because they think I'm racist or something like that. Nobody's ever really accused me of that. They save all that for Joshua. Me, it's just I've got a potty mouth or whatever it might be. But it's their peculiar sensibilities. And if you do not conform to whatever those peculiar sensibilities are, you must be destroyed. There's no quarter. And that has infested the attitude of the LNC. And it's a collectivist mob. And that is the cancer in the party. That type of mob mentality that's even overcome good people.
So, I don't really know what Cato is. Public policy is dead in the water. Maxine Waters is chairman of the Financial Services Committee. Go give her your NGDP targeting white paper, please, because she's a big brainiac when it comes to, she's basically in running for Fed chair. So public policy is an absolute farce. There's no such thing.
Okay, I want to stop there. I don't think it serves anyone to be denigrating the work of other people. That's not your thing, Jeff? Fine. You don't have to volunteer there. That's their thing. I'm a firm believer in the find what you love and let it kill you. So you might think it's non-productive. Who asked you? Like, really? I mean, in this interview, obviously, he was asked his opinion, but why did you need to give your opinion on something that other people are doing that doesn't pick your pocket? I disagree with him, though. While on the face of it, it may seem useless. I do think it helps change minds and lets people, it gives them permission to show these things are possible. They don't need to be implemented to be effective. See, he's defining victory so narrowly, and it's the same straitjacket the Libertarian Party gets painted into. Goes, oh, well, you guys haven't won any major offices. Well, is that all that winning is? So I really think that that was beneath him. You know, they're doing their work. Let them do their work. You don't need to shit on it. And again, I just fundamentally disagree. I think those public policy papers are very useful. And that could be the gateway drug of some people into much more radical ideas just because they haven't allowed themselves to even explore it because they didn't think these things were possible.
You know, that should have been the approach. But look, that's just the way it is. I mean, these divisions are part and parcel of human nature. It's not infighting, it's part of human nature. And in any endeavor, any activity, with any degree of entrepreneurial energy, you have to accept the interpersonal stuff as part of it and work within it. And a guy like you, I mean, people like you. You're good at straddling these different camps. I don't have to, fortunately, but because, you know, a lot of these people at Cato and Reason really dislike the Mises Institute. I mean, it's quite mutual, shall we say. But, you know, that's fine. People can say, well, Ford and Chevy, you both make cars. Why don't you guys get along? Oh, okay.
Right. You know, there was an interesting moment that I had. Well, there were a few interesting moments that I had while Nick Gillespie was interviewing me. And like we, you know, it was fine. Like we got along fine during it. But, you know, he tried to grill me a little bit on some things, which I think is not inappropriate, you know, like in that setting to kind of, you know, kick the tires a little bit and see what's going on here and where I'm at. But I think that you really you're absolutely right when you say that they've kind of bought into a very progressive or left-wing worldview that I'm not even sure they're aware of at times. You know, he said to me at one point something like, he was like, well, you're definitely like a right, you know, libertarian or a right-wing libertarian or something like that. And I said, like, I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not offended by that. It's okay if you want to call me that. I don't really know. And then he brought up a quote. This must have been an old quote from like a couple of years ago on my podcast, where I had basically, I was talking about how awful I thought it was that we lived in a society where so many kids were just like dropped in daycare, raised by nannies, raised by the public school system, and not raised by their parents. And he goes, well, is that really the libertarian position, you know, to be judging people for different lifestyles and all of this? And I just thought it was almost kind of amusing in a way to go, so you find this to be like some right-wing position that I think parents should raise their kids?
Okay.
You can't have no external governance and no internal governance.
Yeah.
So what's the source of internal governance? Well, for most people, most normal people, it's their parents and some sort of upbringing, and so hopefully instills some sort of moral compunction in that. And then it's religion. I mean, this hostility towards religion, I mean, for most people, that's the governing philosophy. So, you know, while they're busy getting drunk and embezzling from work and cheating on their wife, on some level they feel bad about it.
Okay, here's where I'm going to disagree. He was assuming that without culturally conservative values, you have no internal governance. You're either a cultural conservative or you're a wild animal. That's not helpful. I agree. It is impossible to have no external governance, but I don't think libertarianism means that. I think government and governance are inevitable. It's just whether it's voluntary chosen or not. There will always be external governance. It just might be a structure that you don't recognize. Like, for instance, I watch a lot of documentaries about these polygynous communities in the FDLS. And there is a very interesting governance structure amongst the wives. It exists. It will always exist. For you to act as if there isn't this nuclear family where parents are home raising their kids, and all of a sudden, you know, the furries are yipping in the dog park because there's no internal governance structure. That's just a caricature of people who aren't cultural conservatives. And something else I did want to bring up there, where I'd criticized him for being hard on Cato, it is true. Cato and those folks in general really do shit all over the Mises Institute too. And that kind of sniping across the lines needs to stop. So I apologize if I made it seem like it was just one way. It certainly isn't. But I have to say, there is a nascent annoyance that I have at the smug assertion of superiority of culturally conservative values. As if the alternative is chaos. Or, you know, hide your wives and children. And that's not conducive and certainly not proven. All right, I think that is the last clip that I have. I am waiting to see if there is any further commentary. And so let me just give it a few minutes. I am recording something else tonight, which is why I did do this face. So look for another it will be pre-recorded though. It will not be live. It's one of my rare pre-recorded things. I hate editing. But that'll be coming out later tonight. And I might do another live stream tonight if you guys are interested. But it is getting kind of late, so maybe not. But I wanted to do a stream. I guess I'll see who's around. Maybe I'll do it anyway just to entertain myself. Of that thread where I went to a Patriot post and said, I don't worship the state. And all hell broke loose. You can imagine how popular that was. Woo! And then I got Facebook banned for 3 days. So it was like I threw a Molotov cocktail in there and ran away. But they didn't know. I couldn't come back because I got zucked. But they just lost their minds. And I would love to deal with that. You know, because that's fun. I mean, I got heard about how everyone died for my freedom and all that kind of stuff. All right, everyone, I think that is it. We've been at it a couple hours, as these tend to be. I'm going to go record my other thing. I'm leaving for California tomorrow, midday, to go to regional training and hang out with other libertarians. Yeah, the sun is still out where I'm at, Dave Davis, and go to a Jeff Hewitt fundraiser. So that should be fun, and I'll probably be doing some broadcasts from there as well. I think I'm much mentally in a better place to go and hang out with other libertarians, which I definitely was not ready for when I went to the Region 1 conference, and it was just a very awkward experience. I think this will be better. So I will talk to you guys over the weekend, maybe talk to you guys some more tonight, maybe do another live stream tomorrow. Who knows? I did start extracting clips from that King pill thing. Help. Blink, you know, that blink twice if you're in trouble. My God. And I'm going to have Angela McCardle on because Matt, Mr. King pill, was shooting his mouth off about how he mopped the floor with her in the debate, basically. Didn't say it to her face, though. So I'd like to interview her about that, because I seriously doubt that. I just think he probably got in 100 words to her one. A multiplicity of words does not make you more right. But okay. We are done for this evening, and I will see you later. And I fixed, Andrew, if you're watching, I fixed the spelling of your name in the closing credits.